Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Ethereum. I have a special guest with me, Kane of Sundog Software. He's an entrepreneur with lots of software businesses under his belt. And the reason that I wanted to invite him on is, as you know, there is a need for more blockchain applications out there. And also the blockchain space needs the upcoming, whatever the future Googles, Apples, Microsofts are going to be, that they haven't been created yet. And so there's just a real need for people to start blockchain businesses, develop smart contract applications. And so if you had an idea, which I hope you do, then you might benefit from this talk on how to even begin to start your own blockchain software business. So I'm very glad to welcome Frank Kane. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So before we begin, you have an impressive resume, but why don't you go ahead, for the people that don't know you, kind of elaborate on what you've accomplished in your illustrious career.
Yeah, sure. Well, I kind of started off in the game development world, believe it or not. But after that tangent, about in 2003, I think it was, I got a call from Amazon.com out in Seattle and got a job there as a senior level software engineer, headed out there and worked on some of the pioneering recommender systems out there primarily. You know, people who bought this also bought stuff like that you see on Amazon. And I spent about 10 years at Amazon, and it was a really interesting time where I learned a lot because Amazon was a much smaller company back then. So I got a lot of, exposure to sort of the top management there. You know who that is. And,
yes.
And learned a lot. So ultimately, I left there as a senior manager running the IMDb division, which is the Internet Movie Database. And what happened, we're talking 2012, about 7 years ago at this point. Basically, my family couldn't take the weather in Seattle anymore. My doctor was saying I was going to have a heart attack if I stayed there much longer. So I'm like, well, okay, I can stay there and get rich off of stock options, or I can stay alive and do something else. So we moved to Florida at that point, and that's where I realized that, I had to create my own business. So it was sort of born out of necessity that I launched my own technology business here in Florida, because I just moved here without a job. I'm just like, well, it'll work out, I hope, right? Do some freelance work.
Wow.
Worst case scenario.
Okay.
And fortunately it did. And, I want to get into that more definitely as we talk more, because it wasn't really quite as a risky of a move as I'm making it sound. I actually validated some business ideas in my spare time before I made that change. So I had a pretty good confidence that it was going to work out, right? So.
Right. Now, I have to say, so in addition to your experience starting businesses, I've heard nothing but good things about Amazon's business prowess. So I imagine working for Amazon, being so close to Jeff Bezos, you saw a really well-run company, well-managed, using the latest technology. So that must have been a business educational experience as well, right?
Oh, he was transformative. I mean, I went there, with a good background in technology and software development, but, as we'll talk about, that's not enough to start a business. There's this whole other world around how do you market that? How do you validate ideas? How do you, make sure you're building the right product? And how are you making sure that you're keeping your customers happy throughout the entire process? And, being able to learn from, who the guy that became the richest guy in the world,
right.
It's a unique opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and I keep hearing little bits about their corporate culture, and it just seems like they're always trying to, add the latest knowledge, business wisdom that they can find, and so so I'm kind of jealous now that you did that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's publicly available out there. They make no secret of their leadership principles. And really, Amazon's secret is that they actually live by them. It's all about being customer focused, and having this internal culture of being very data driven and, the ability to introspect and sort of be critical of yourself and critical of others in a constructive manner. And that's a lot of what it's all about.
Okay, so then why don't you kind of now elaborate on the businesses that you started, how you said that you did some due diligence before the move. So maybe people need to hear or would like to hear about that. How did you kind of
Yeah, I'm hoping the story itself will be, informative for people because, it's sort of a good parable in how businesses evolve over time and often into things that you don't even imagine at first, right?
Right.
Um, so I mentioned briefly that I was working in the video game industry before I went to Amazon, and an offshoot of that was that I was working on training simulators for the military at one point before I went to Amazon. And I knew that one big unsolved problem in the world of video games and training simulations and virtual reality stuff was a realistic representation of the sky and the clouds and oceans and natural effects like that that are very complex in nature and hard to reproduce in a virtual environment. So I kind of kept tinkering with that on the side in my spare time while I was at Amazon working as a manager. Fortunately, it was a very orthogonal field of dabbling, if you will, to what Amazon was doing. So there was no conflict there in terms of my, non-compete agreements or non-disclosure agreements. So this was something that I could do legitimately and legally on the side while I was at Amazon. These days, people call it a side hustle, if you want to get all caught up in the Bay Area buzzwords. But really, it was just sort of like a personal curiosity. I wanted to see if I could do it, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up with a sort of a prototype library that I could sell that actually had fairly realistic looking clouds and skies and water. So I figured, well, why not put it out there on the internet and see if I can sell it and make money off of it? So, I knew there was sort of an unfilled demand for this sort of a product. It was a very niche product. There's not a whole lot of customers out there for it, but, they're big customers with, big, military backing and stuff like that. So basically I hung out my shingle on the web and, kind of let that grow while I was at Amazon over the course of 7 or 8 years, I guess. And over time, it kind of took on a life of its own. So, it remained sort of a side venture. And when you're working full time at Amazon, you don't have a whole lot of free time to begin with. But with what little free time I had, I was able to grow that business into something that I was pretty sure could pay the bills if I devoted a full time effort to it.
Wait, whoa. Okay, so you made a software simulation of the sky, and you're saying people that were creating their own simulations of Earth or Mars or whatever planet, you're saying that they saw your piece and they said, oh, I can just snap that into the simulation I'm working on, and there was enough of a market of people that wanted that specific of a feature?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's this whole market of people who make flight simulators for training pilots, for example, or training people in the Air Force or the Army or what have you. And it's actually a big business, it turns out.
Okay, now wait. There's another thing that stood out to me. So I've been told that a lot of engineering types think that if they just design an awesome product, the world is going to beat a path to their door, but that you have to do marketing and other steps. But there's a few engineers like Google that get lucky, the founders of Google, and they make an awesome product, and then and they don't really have to do much marketing. So, now it seems like you got away with the same thing. It's from the way you described it. You just put it out there, and then you didn't have to then go hire an MBA to market the darn thing. People just found you.
Well, I'm oversimplifying things a bit there, right? So
Okay.
the truth is, I did put some thought into creating a website around this product and marketing that website. The good thing about creating digital products and technology products is that, it's a lot simpler to distribute that and market it online and at very low cost. So, I made sure I was doing all the smart things with search engine optimization and, working in Amazon gave me an advantage in understanding that world, right? So,
Right.
Just working in the web, sort of muscle memory of how to market things on the internet. So, I made sure that people could find it. I made sure that I went to a relevant trade show for that world and, kind of pounded the pavement, made sure people knew I was out there, handed out my business cards, got some contacts to market stuff to there. So, it wasn't just really a matter of just throwing it out there and hoping for the best. There was definitely some marketing effort behind it as well.
Oh, okay. So you did have some conversations, and presumably the people that liked it then spread the word, and then you kind of had organic marketing going on.
Yeah, and kind of the luxury that you get by doing it on the side at first is that there's no rush, right? You don't have investors breathing down your neck saying, I want 10x growth within a year.
Right.
Take your time. So I was able to, start off slow. I started off by literally just putting up a website and seeing who would find it. And a couple of people did at a relatively low price point to attract those initial customers. And they ended up being my beta testers, basically. They didn't realize it, but they were.
Okay.
So, I got a lot of valuable feedback from those early customers and used that to make the product even better. And as I gained more and more confidence in the product itself, I invested more in marketing it. I raised its price, and that's what caused it to grow to the point where I could actually make a living off of it.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. So, and you had the insight to put two and two together. You saw that there was this need in the marketplace, and rather than just letting that idea go, you went with it, right? You tried to fill that need.
Yeah, exactly. In this case, it was a genuine unfilled need. Other people came in and sort of created competing products shortly after I put mine out. But that's a case where it was sort of like a really a small yet gaping hole in the marketplace. That's sort of the ideal thing that you want to see.
Okay, and so we can certainly continue talking more about that. But after you moved to Florida, was there other businesses that you started, or?
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to get to.
Okay.
A lot of times you'll start a business and it doesn't really, it will morph and transform and evolve in ways you never saw coming, right? So, you just have to be open to new opportunities. It's not just about luck; it's about making your own luck and being open to new opportunities, new ways of being self-employed or starting new businesses and just going after them. Don't make no your default answer. So, a couple of examples of that. I put out this software that renders skies and clouds and weather effects, right? So one day a guy contacts me saying, hey, I'm building add-ons for a consumer flight simulator called X-Plane. I'd like to partner with you and actually package your software into an add-on for this consumer flight simulator. I'm like, well, why not? All I have to lose is some time and actually trying to build a prototype of this. We'll put it out in the market, see what happens. And, pretty quickly, in a few months, that became a new source of revenue that matched the existing revenue that I was getting from the library itself. So just from that experiment, basically I doubled my revenue.
Okay, now, so presumably, so when you negotiated the contract, you got maybe billable hours to the software development, and then you got some kind of royalties, I'm imagining?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, okay, when I first started, I did do some, work for hire stuff where like you're doing billable hours and, working as a freelancer basically. But over time, I've learned that should be avoided. Your time is much better spent building products that will have sort of a residual income coming in over time, right? So if I spend a month, billing that time to somebody else, I'm never going to get a return on that time. I'm just getting the value of that month that I put into it, right? Mm-hmm. But if I spend a month making a new product, that product can bring in revenue every month for years to come, right? And if you compound a bunch of those products, that's really where things start to take off.
Okay, but I'm guessing the people that are listening, what they're thinking is, yes, that's true if the risk pays off, but if it wasn't something that the market needed, and you don't charge billable hours, then you could lose that month and you don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's a calculated risk, right? So you got to make sure that when you're risking your time to endeavor that you're not going to risk, starving to death in the process, right? So, I made sure that I have enough money in the bank before I moved to Florida to at least float me for a few months, worst case scenario. That's just, being responsible, right? When I first moved here, I started doing some freelance work because I wanted to make sure that I had some steady, reliable form of income because I knew my runway was only a few months at that point. But as my initial product started bringing in more and more recurring revenue every month, I began to realize, I'll be just fine if I don't do as much freelance work. I can actually afford to take some of that time and invest it toward more new products. So it's sort of this calculated balance between investing in future revenue streams and, just keeping the lights on, so to speak.
Right. And so presumably the reason that worked for you is you were a good judge of potentially lucrative ideas to work on.
Yeah,
right?
Certainly not all of them were winners. There were certainly plenty of flops as well. There are plenty of failed experiments in the trash can of Sundog Software, but none of them were done at such an extreme risk that I knew that I would have to move back to Seattle or go back to getting a quote unquote real job if it didn't work out.
Right, and so were all the businesses that you started related to your sky simulation, or was there other business is
No, no,
completely unrelated.
yeah, like this is another example of sort of like being open to new opportunities that come your way. So, one of the initial freelance gigs I did was actually doing curriculum development for an online education company in New York called General Assembly. And they wanted me to sort of lean on my experience at Amazon to develop a curriculum around data science for them. So I did that, and it was a work for hire thing, like I said, because I started off doing that just to, gain some confidence in my ability to be self-sufficient.
Okay.
But anyway, after that released, I got a call from Udemy. They're a big online, massively online open course company.
Online classes, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they said, hey, we actually have a big gaping hole in our course catalog around the field of big data and machine learning. What do you think about making some courses about that and see how it does? And in the back of my head, I'm doing this mental math. Like, well, it'll probably take about a month to actually create a course or so. It turned out to be sort of underestimating the effort. What's the worst that could happen? I waste a month of my time. It's still an experiment that could prove to be really lucrative in the long run. So I did. I knew I had well over the month of runway, and I had enough recurring income coming in anyway to like keep the lights on. So I didn't have a whole lot to lose there other than my time. So I tried it, and initially it was a flop. The first course that I put out, I think it made $200 in its first month, which isn't so bad if it's just a thing on the side. But if you're trying to make a living off it, that's not near what you need, right? But I didn't give up on it because, I put a lot of effort into it. So I actually made a second course that was a free course that promoted that course that I made. And that's when things started to snowball. And today, online courses on Udemy are actually the biggest part of my business. They have absolutely nothing to do with, simulating the sky or clouds. They're all about teaching, big data, machine learning, and intelligence. And that's the cash cow right now, completely unforeseen. But that's kind of the way the direction that the company went. So you just
but you said that it took off when you had a free class. How did the free class make you to be financially successful with Udemy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit technical and specific to Udemy because, whenever you're on an online platform like that, maybe there are some parallels here to your world, come to think of it. But, there's an algorithm that you have to make happy at the end of the day. If their algorithm sees a course is getting high conversion rates, lots of reviews, lots of customer engagement, then the algorithm will start promoting that course more. And at that point, it's sort of this flywheel effect where you have more and more promotion happening from the platform that leads to more and more conversion, and it just sort of starts to feed on itself.
I'm guessing
flywheel push.
So let me guess. You had a free class that built your reputation, and then because of that free class, you had visitors and eyeballs inspecting other classes that were not free. Is that the business model there?
But at the end of the free class, there's basically a pitch. If you want to learn more in more depth, go check out my $10 paid course. That's way longer and way more involved. And that was like enough to give that course enough of a kick, enough of a boost to the flywheel to get it to start spinning, if you will.
Okay, interesting. And so you didn't give up when your first class didn't take off immediately, right? It wasn't like you just sat back and then everything was wonderful. You had the perseverance to make a free class, and by luck or intuition, somehow you knew or you found out that was a great method of advertising. And so then that became successful.
Yeah, and to sort of generalize that to small businesses or emerging businesses or startups in general, I think this gets around one of the most misunderstood and difficult parts of launching a new business. There's this whole concept of a minimum viable product that you might have heard of, right?
Right, yes.
And a lot of people make a mistake with that in one of two ways. One is that they put out a product that isn't really minimal viable. They put out something that's kind of substandard, something that doesn't really have the quality that the market wants to see. And they say, oh, well, it didn't take off, therefore it's a bad idea. We'll go try something else. That's one way to screw up. The other way to screw up is to give up too soon. So a lot of times these products need a little bit of time to take off. They need a few months to actually gain traction in the marketplace. And sometimes you need to do some additional marketing activity to give them that traction. So if you put out an MVP and you give up after 2 weeks and say, oh, the market didn't validate my idea, maybe you're wrong,
right.
You just bypassed a big opportunity and didn't realize it.
Right. So for the people that don't know, I believe the term minimum viable product comes from the wonderful book Lean Mark.
That's its genesis, the lean startup, I think it is.
Yeah. And so the idea is instead of locking yourself in your basement and spending too much time developing your product, you want to get it out there fairly soon to get feedback. And so you could make course corrections before investing too much time in mistakes and dead ends. But you're saying that there's a balance between getting it out too soon, but then you also have to be patient and do the work to give it a chance to ferment and grow.
Yeah, I mean, there's to be blunt, there's sort of a fine line between minimally viable and half-assed, and you have to make sure you're on the right side of that line, you know?
Right. Well, no, see, that brings up another great question is how do you know when you're betting on the wrong horse and you're sitting there and you're investing more time and more money? Do you have any thoughts on when it's appropriate to keep persevering and when to just cut your losses on an idea?
Yeah, I mean, humans have amazing survival instincts, and ultimately that's what guides your actions as an entrepreneur, I think. You know very clearly in your head how much runway you have, how much risk you can take without, risking paying your mortgage or not. So when you're starting to spend so much time on an idea that's not actually producing a payback that you start to worry about the future, that's kind of nature's way of telling you that it's time to try something different or double down on something that was working,
Okay. So a big part of it is if you're not generating income, right? That's going to make the decision for you in a sense.
Yes, survival is a powerful motivator.
Yes.
More so than you might imagine.
Okay. All right. So from the way you've described your background, I don't know if you're a genius or maybe you're 50% genius and 50% luck or whatever, but it just seems like you have the Midas touch. You did this business while you're at Amazon and then you just went to Udemy. I assume there's lots of people that do Udemy and don't take off. They aren't successful, it seems, but then what do you think you have that makes you to be successful in all these things that you touch?
Part of it is just persistence, like I talked about, I didn't give up when the first month of that course didn't take off, and most instructors do, I mean, they make both mistakes, actually. They'll put out a course that's substandard, and they won't give it enough time to take off, and they'll say, that was a failure, I give up, I'll go back to my day job.
Okay.
Vast majority of people do that. If you just don't do that, if you're persistent, put in a persistent, consistent effort into whatever you're trying to accomplish, that itself will put you out of the pack.
Okay. And is there any issues with, like you mentioned that your Sky simulation that you had competition, and then at Udemy, obviously data science is a hot topic now, and there's probably lots of competition. So what are your thoughts? Is that an issue, or do you worry about competition?
I don't focus on it. And, that's also something I learned from Amazon as well. You want to be aware of your competition, obviously, but it's not usually productive to focus on them. It's better to focus on your customers and what they want, right? So what is it that your customers want that they're not getting today? Maybe that involves looking at your competition and what they're not giving their customers. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's not about the competition to an extent, right? Like I probably could not replicate what I did on Udemy today if I were to start now, 3 or 4 years later than when I did it, because there is so much more competition on that platform and it's a lot harder to break into it now.
Okay.
So, you do want to be smart in, where you're investing your efforts. At the time, Udemy was still relatively small. It was still pretty much a wide open field in those spaces that I was teaching. So I knew that was a much more viable opportunity than it would be, say, today if I looked at it.
Okay. So you've given a great description of your background and your business experience, and if you have more, certainly you can add to that. But I also wanted to maybe start discussing kind of general advice for people that are listening that maybe have a desire to start a business now or in the near future. Yeah. And so then we could talk about, how do you evaluate an idea? How do you even come up with the idea? How do you get the time to do it without going broke? Do you want to kind of start that topic of conversation?
Oh gosh, there's so much to talk about there. Yeah. So, I mean, let's start with finding an idea, right? So ideally, you want to find the intersection of things that that you're an expert on, things that you're passionate about, and things that customers need, right? So you want to find that little sweet spot in the Venn diagram of stuff that you're an expert on, about, and there's an unfilled need in the marketplace. And that it's not necessarily a completely unfilled need, like I mentioned earlier. Like maybe it's just that nobody's doing it well right now, you know? So if you have a sort of a better way of doing it, a cheaper way of doing it, that's okay too.
Okay.
So that's sort of the structure of like figuring out, is this idea worth pursuing? At least where to start from.
Okay, so that I think that's important. So it's just to make it completely drop dead simple. It's not that you think it's cool. It has to be that somebody else needs it or wants it.
Yes.
Right. So yes, definitely. So maybe discuss your ideas with potential customers, see what their response is before you jump into this head first.
Well, that's what the lean startup would tell you. You know, they would tell you to find potential customers, interview them, find out what keeps them awake at night and how you can solve those sorts of problems. And that advice is well and good. I never did that. You know, like you can do some market research and figure out, you know, whether there's a hole or not. But the key that you alluded to is not creating technology that's in search of a problem. You know, that's a very common mistake from technologists. So like, look at this cool technology I built. Isn't it awesome? Everyone's going to want this. But if it's not solving a real problem, it's worthless in the marketplace, right? So
Right.
that is like a sort of a different way to look at it. You want to always be customer focused. And again, this is something I learned at Amazon. We always started off a project proposal with a press release. So the first thing we would write is, what would the press release look like to the public after I launched this product? You know, and that really forced you to think about what's the value to the public, to your customer, that this thing is bringing to the table, and is that exciting or is it not? You know,
Okay.
really lets you focus on what's important.
Now, how do you, okay, related to what you just said, how do you find out what potential customers want and need? Because people don't have the time necessarily or the interest to be just spouting off, boy, I really wish somebody made this, somebody made that. So how do you get that information?
Yeah, I mean, if you're operating in the space of what you know and what you're passionate about, you probably have a pretty good idea just from the circles that you're in, right? I mean, yes, you could do the lean startup thing and like actually like start going through directories and mining the web for contacts of potential customers you can interview. But, you know, let's take the space of blockchain, for example. You know, I imagine a big challenge there is like reducing the transaction costs that are involved so that we can apply that technology to, you know, broader problems like, you know, validating votes and things like that, right? So
Right. So infrastructure development, yeah, there's scaling, yeah, security. There's all kinds of properties people could improve, work on, definitely.
yeah, and you know the pain of like, you know, converting Bitcoin into real world currency. I mean, the problems there and challenges are very well known, right? So you don't necessarily have to overthink, you know, how to identify the problems that need to be solved there.
Okay, all right. So you think of an idea that you have the talent to maybe contribute to. You do some modicum of confirmation that there's going to be a potential market for it, and so now kind of guide us to what would be the next step. How much time should you quit your job and work on this, max on your credit card until you get this done? What's the
That's
next?
another huge common mistake. A lot of people are like, I'm going to quit my job and get venture capital and like get angel funding and, you know, take millions of dollars and put it all on the line and I have to get something done in a year, right? That is one way to do it. That is not the way I recommend. Yeah, if you can, it's a much less stressful way to go to just validate an idea on the side as a, you know, quote unquote side hustle. You know, if you can invest enough time in your spare time to put out a prototype, see if people are actually going to buy it, if they're interested in it, you know, get some of that initial feedback. Only at the point where you're like, yeah, I could actually pay the bills off of this, should you think about quitting your day job, in my opinion.
So minimize the risk by keeping your what's putting food on the table and do it on the side.
Yeah, and this is probably a time to talk about the two kinds of businesses that you might want to start. One is called a lifestyle business, and one is called a growth business. Very different objectives with those two. So personally, I've gone the lifestyle business route, but you can switch between the two later on too. The difference is that a lifestyle business is you just want to make a nice living, you know, in the long run, doing something that you love with a minimum of stress, you know?
Right.
So, you know, you just want to have a nice lifestyle. That's why they call it a lifestyle business. And to do that, you know, you want to minimize the number of employees you have. You know, I work primarily through contractors, so I don't have a lot of, you know, legal or professional obligations that I have to deal with. I work at home, you know, so I have to deal with traffic. There's no corporate politics I have to deal with. I don't have any investors to answer to. Nobody tells me what to do, so that's the world I was going for.
Okay. And then whereas growth would be a little bit more risky, bring in investors.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you can do that. You pitch an idea, you get some angel funding or venture capital funding. And at that point, it's like, it's all on you. You got to go get an office. You have to hire people. You got to pay them. You have to manage them. You have to get that initial product out really quickly, tons of pressure. And, it's either going to take off or not. Odds are it won't. And at that point, what do? You probably get acqui-hired and go back to work.
Right. I saw an interesting podcast by, I forgot his name. His initials are DHH. It's the creator of Ruby on Rails, and he works for the company Basecamp. He has a podcast. He's really against venture capital funding, and because they're not just going to give you that funding for free, they're going to expect a lot of control, ownership, and also like what you were saying, if it doesn't, you could lose a lot of your life, and they could take it all from you. And so he really suggests what you were saying about doing it on the side. Not only will you keep control and have more peace of mind, but he also said that by being limited the amount of time that you have to work on it, it forces you to spend your time really wisely. And you can almost do a better product by having those constraints, ironically enough. And he goes into detail more on that, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. Unfortunately, a lot of people will start a business and they're a little bit naive on how the world of venture capital works, and they end up getting screwed over, even if their product's a success. There's a lot of stories of people being fired as the CEO of their own company as soon as the venture capitalists come in, right? That's not uncommon.
That's true. And then also, if you're just working for yourself, and like I said, if you don't have that much time, you're going to do the most important things first. Try to get that minimum viable product done. Whereas you can imagine somebody getting venture funding, and they say, now I have a 2-year runway, and I can just take it easy, right? Add whatever, all the bells and whistles to my product. It's just a different mindset.
Well, just the mere act of spending $2 million is going to distract you from a lot of time, right? That means you have to go out and hire people, you have to train them, you have to manage them, and not all of them are going to be contributing directly to what you actually need to build at the end of the day. So, it's definitely a more focused effort to start by yourself, bring in consultants and contractors as needed to help you out and to help you grow, but keep it to that,
Right. And then fortunately, the types of businesses you're involved in, and we're talking about software in 2019, it doesn't need a lot of startup capital, right? You just need to start programming, store your programs in the cloud, use a lot of open source tools. There isn't really the overhead to get started as maybe there used to be in some other industries like hardware.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely as far as capital expenditures go, absolutely not. You can do it for basically free. I do want to make the point, though, that, you shouldn't have this mentality that you can do it all yourself either. That's sort of the other extreme that also doesn't work. You have to be open to getting help when you need it. So when I moved to Orlando, the first thing I did was find the local business incubator program. So this is like a community-funded program where they would actually get new entrepreneurs, give them training in, basic business skills, marketing, management skills and things like that. Connect you with local lawyers and accountants and things like that, and the people that you need, and kind of give you that sort of crash course in how to not just be a technologist, but how to be an entrepreneur. And a lot of communities have these sorts of resources, and I highly recommend taking advantage of them.
You said that was an incubator? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, they use the word a little bit differently here in Florida than they would in the Bay Area. So in the world of startups, an incubator would be like Y Combinator or something where, you're getting millions of dollars in venture capital, and they take you under their wing and give you a lot of guidance on how to spend that money. Out here, it's more like an educational thing. It's a free program. Well, it's like a couple $100 a month, I think is what it was to participate in it. And it's really just more of a training and education program and some low cost office space as well to start off with.
Okay, so to summarize some of the points you've made, so be customer focused, keep your day job, and then also try to communicate with other people that could give you good advice about business, about your product, other maybe even other potential entrepreneurs. You can find maybe those at incubators or accelerators or whatever your city calls them. Is that all correct?
Yeah, yeah. And one nuance to that advice is to be careful who you're getting advice from. You know, if you're running a software business, advice that you get from somebody who's out selling physical products to big companies is going to be very, not very relevant to what you're trying to do, right? So it's very easy to be led astray by people that are doing businesses that are not similar to yours. So something to watch out for.
Okay. Now, I don't quote me on this, but I think I remember hearing a long time ago that Bill Gates, for Microsoft, they never got outside funding, right? So he used to be the richest person in the world. Microsoft's one of the biggest companies, and I don't think they ever had to get outside funding. That's again the magic of software, that there's not a lot of overhead costs. So and we've shared about the issues with having other people give you their money, and then you have some obligations to them. But have you ever had to get funding, or is there ever a time where you think it would be a good idea to mess with that?
Honestly, no. You know, the minute that you take a loan or, you know, some sort of outside funding, then you are beholden to that person, right? And
Right.
if you're after a lifestyle and it's a lifestyle business, then that is what you're avoiding at all costs. So much better to just grow organically using your own initiative and organic effort, in my opinion.
Okay. So you have an idea, customers. You're working on it. Maybe you've got the product almost done. You have potential customers that are interested in the idea. Now, what do you recommend as far as marketing to kind of push the product across the finish line? I know you've said you've tried lots of marketing and some of it hasn't worked. Can you kind of share like what has worked effectively?
Yeah, it's complicated though because the world has changed so quickly in the past few years when it comes to online marketing. So when I started in 2012, one of the first things I did was optimize my Google ads. You know, they were called AdWords at the time. And just by being a little bit smarter about how I was structuring my online advertising through Google, I doubled my revenue just by doing that.
Wow.
So that's one way to do it.
Uh,
Yeah, but I probably couldn't do that again today because, you know, ads are a lot more expensive than they used to be. So getting a return on them is a lot more challenging. There's a lot more competition for keywords. So, you know, online advertising is a lot more difficult to be successful with these days. And it depends on your market too. I mean, obviously, you're only going to really rely on that if you're selling to consumers. You know, if you're selling to other businesses, then you're probably going to want to establish one-on-one relationships with those businesses instead.
right. Now, I don't know how much you know about Seth Godin. He's a marketing.
Yeah. I saw him talk a couple of years ago, actually.
Okay, so I'm reading his book called This is Marketing, which kind of encapsulates his years of experience. And he actually is not a big fan of Google AdWords. He's a big idea. He calls it your smallest viable market or audience, if I recall correctly. And his idea is you start small, make something people love, and then they'll develop relationships, connections, and then by word of mouth, they will spread your idea organically, and that works better than just this blanket, carpet bombing, all this generic advertising. That he says that doesn't work so well anymore.
It doesn't work so well anymore. That's true. I think, 5 years ago it was a viable approach, but these days, not so much. However, it might be your only option at first, right? Like if you just need to get that initial set of customers before people will start giving you word of mouth. And to get that initial set of customers, maybe that's how you do it. Maybe you just like pump a bunch of money into advertising, maybe even take a loss on it at first, but just to get that initial word of mouth going and kickstarted, it might be worthwhile.
Right. I think Seth Godin would probably like what you said you did for the Sky simulation, where you went to a trade show and you're passing out business cards and that kind of developing those relationships, talking with people. That would probably be a fan of, I believe, from what little I know.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is I did both. I had online ads and I was out there pounding the pavement, talking to individuals. And, the growth was a product of both of those things. But if I were to do it again today, I'd probably go to the trade show first.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about how to test your idea, making sure the customers like it. Most likely avoid venture capital if you can get away with it. A little bit of marketing. Is there anything that we have missed, or any other big topics that you want to allude to?
Well, I don't want to completely discredit the idea of building a growth business, and I think it's worth talking about why you would want to do that instead.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Go
So,
ahead. We haven't touched on that. So yeah, definitely.
yeah, so the downside of building a lifestyle business is that it's very difficult to sell it because it's completely dependent on you as an individual. It becomes wrapped around you, and unless you're willing to sell yourself along with the business, you can't really sell it. Basically, you're talking about an acqui-hire at that point, where a company would be buying your business to get access to you personally. So that would be bad, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I've had offers where people have offered me a bunch of money to acquire my company, but they would want me to become an employee of that company for a very long period of time as part of the deal.
Okay.
Whereas with a growth business, you have enough capital to actually hire employees and make the company not entirely dependent on you individually. You can hire people that can keep that company going even if you're not around. So that's where the idea of a serial entrepreneur comes in. Someone who just like starts a business, sells it, makes a few $1,000,000, starts another business, sells it again for a few million more dollars. And if you really want to, if your goal is to not just be rich, but to be filthy, stinking rich, that's the way to do it. Personally,
Okay.
I'm okay with
Okay.
not being filthy, stinking rich.
All right. So just to be clear, you're distinguishing lifestyle and growth businesses by whether they need you. Is that
That's
correct?
that's really what the main difference is at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. Well, presumably then any lifestyle business could be converted to a growth business by hiring the right people.
Exactly. Yes, it's not a one-way street. So, if I had a change of heart and said, actually, being a serial entrepreneur sounds kind of cool, I could hire a few people, hire someone to manage this company for me. And I've grown it to the point myself where I could probably do that if I really wanted to, right? So it is possible to transition from a lifestyle business to a growth business. The other way around would be a little bit more painful, I think, though.
And I guess it really depends on if you want to keep working on a specific business, then maybe you would stick with the lifestyle type business. And then if you just were interested, like you said, in the cash out, then you would make it self-sustaining on its own. And it just really depends on what you're interested in doing, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. At some point you're going to want to retire, and if there's a lifestyle business that depends on you, your choices are basically to shut it down entirely and like live off what you saved up so far, or keep working on it, right? But there is a middle ground too. If you can build up these passive income streams, for example, income from these courses, I could just do nothing for a few years and still have money coming in just from the work that I did earlier. So, there is a way to still make money while not being like completely absorbed in the business as well.
So then would you say that your Udemy classes are a growth business? From what you're saying, it seems like it is, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
that's
not going to become Facebook. It's not going to make you $1 billion, but it is something that doesn't require you every day to be there, right?
well, in a way it does because I have to keep the courses updated. I have to keep making new courses because technology becomes obsolete over time that I'm teaching.
Oh, I
But if I
see.
wanted to pivot that into a growth business, what I would do is, and I sort of like laid the groundwork for this already. I just never actually pulled the trigger on it. I just wanted to have the option of doing it. Create a sort of an umbrella that so it's not just Frank Kane training. It's Sundog Education Training. That's the name of my education branch of my company. And in theory, I can hire other instructors to create courses for me under that brand, right? And at that
Right.
point, I would
Okay.
have a growth business because it's
I
not just me;
see.
it's this like suite of instructors that work for the company.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. All right. So that's always an option that people have. I would guess I don't know if I use the word should, but it seems like that most people would want to go in that direction because, like you said, we can't be working forever. And so, what happens if you're injured or you want to take some time off? So that it seems like just structuring your business in such a way that it could work without you seems like the wisest choice.
Well, not always. I
Yeah.
mean, do you ever read the 4 Hour Work Week?
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yeah, a
possible.
long time
Like
ago.
that stuff can happen. Like when I read that, I didn't believe it, but it is possible to hire enough assistants that you can actually get away with only working 4 hours. So I can still take a vacation and just like, check in on my email and stuff and deal with pressing issues, before I've had my coffee even and still have the rest of the day available. And if I just wanted to keep my business like floating in maintenance mode, I could do that indefinitely. So even though it is tied, quote unquote, tied to me personally, just keeping the lights on doesn't take that much effort. I have like contractors that will help manage my correspondence, assistants that will help to answer questions from students, things like that. So I have a social
Okay.
media manager that makes it look like I'm still doing all sorts of stuff, even though I'm not. So with the right team in place, you can still pull it off.
Now, actually, you just brought up a related topic I wanted to ask you about. So, in order to make it a growth business, you have to hire contractors, full-time employees, what have you. But then that gets into, I mean, that there's all kinds of legal issues there, and then there's a lot of expense, obviously, with hiring other people, and so you have to make enough to be able to afford that you're coming out ahead, that it's a good idea financially to hire people. So that seems like a big risky component as well.
Yeah, and for a growth business, that makes sense because you want to make sure that you have full-time employees that will be transferred along with the business should you sell it. But for a lifestyle business, usually a contractor makes more sense. And the nice thing about using contractors is there's no long-term commitment. I even have one that's structured on basically a revenue share agreement, so I never have to worry about my ability to pay him. But yeah, it's just a whole lot simpler when you don't have to worry about benefits and work being having the pressure of knowing that you're the guy that's putting food on this other family's table. It's a big burden.
Oh, okay. So the revenue share, I'm guessing the way you structure it, what you mean is that you don't pay them an hourly wage, you just share the profits that come up. Is
Correct.
that
Yeah.
okay? And so there's no risk for you there. So you're getting help. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? For
And it's
some,
also good for him too, because as my company grows, he's automatically getting raises. So everybody.
right. Everybody's happy. Okay. Wow. Okay. So we've covered a good number of topics. Not all the aspects of starting a business, marketing, lifestyle businesses, growth businesses. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wind it down?
One last thought: if
Cover
you are
most of
thinking of
it.
starting a business, make sure you get a lawyer, make sure you get an accountant. I know when you're starting a business, like you don't want to spend any money, and those people are expensive, but really, you got to do it. Make sure that you structure your company properly. You're paying all the right taxes. Things are structured the way that they need to be legally, or else you will find yourself in a world of hurt. Don't make that mistake.
Okay, so you take care of everything tax wise, accounting wise. Do you have a corporation or do you just work as a sole proprietor?
When I was doing it as a side hustle, it was a sole proprietor sort of deal. So I just reported it. In the U.S., they call it a Schedule C on your income taxes.
Right.
But when it started to become a full-time gig, I actually set up what's called a limited liability corporation for a legal standpoint. And from a tax standpoint, it's an S corporation. And that sort of gives you a few benefits of like liability protection and also some
Right.
tax savings as well.
Right. Now, tell me if you agree with this. I met with a lawyer once about starting a corporation because I had read some books that, oh yeah, if you start your own corporation, you could do all these games like say that your car is a company car and this and that. And you're just going to play all these games and save money on your taxes. But the lawyer, what he told me was that so Congress is very good about closing loopholes.
Yeah.
And they caught on to that game. And so there's not really that much advantage to having an S Corp, C Corp, and that a lot of people just use a sole proprietorship, and that he hasn't even created for a customer any S and C Corps for a number of years. And for liability, you can just get liability insurance, which
Mhm.
is cheaper than. So, anyways, it was kind of interesting that even the tax laws keep changing and evolving, so you have to be on top of that. And so it might not necessarily mean that everybody has to start a corporation.
Yeah, it's an individual thing. So you definitely need to talk to a lawyer and talk to an accountant to figure out what your personal situation is. In my situation, the savings on self-employment taxes make the S Corp worth it, very much so. And from a liability standpoint, I have enough personal assets that I really don't want those exposed to a lawsuit. You never know who's going to sue you for how much money, and liability insurance doesn't cover everything. So, there's still things to think about there as well.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we added that little legal component there at the end. That's good. All right. So we've covered a lot of bases. All right. Well, thank you, Frank Kane, for sharing your thoughts with us. And so Frank's company is Sundog Software. I'll put links in the metadata to his company, so you can take a look if you like. And yes, just great stuff. And I just wish you the best of luck on your businesses.
Thank you, and I wish your listeners the best of luck in anything that they might start.
All right. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Very good.
Cool.
I love it. Okay. So I will put it up, and you should see it in a couple days. And and so we're off and running. And so I can send you a link to it if you like when I'm done.
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to promote it to my audience as well. Give you guys a little bit of extra.
Okay. All right. Okay. So have a good rest of the day. And so thanks again.
All right. Thanks. Good talking to you.